Hello, my name is Jim Turk, and I'm the director of the Center for Free Expression at Ryerson University. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am speaking to you today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I acknowledge also that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. On behalf of our Center for Free Expression at Ryerson University and the co-sponsors for today's event, the Edmonton Public Library, the Milton Public Library, Penn Canada, the Thunder Bay Public Library, the Toronto Public Library, and the Vancouver Public Library, I want to welcome you to the 8th in the Center for Free Expression's In Conversation series, which features prominent guests discussing important issues in the current political moment, in which democracy is under threat, public discourse on vital matters is fragmented into self-affirming ideological bubbles when not discouraged altogether, and censorship is increasingly seen as an ally rather than an impediment to social justice. Today, we are returning to the issue of cancel culture. We're in a time where our responses to difference are increasingly those of exclusion rather than critical engagement. Use of ad hominem rhetorical tactics, which delegitimize the other and appeal to authorities to punish or remove those with whom we disagree, rather than for us to undertake the harder work of spelling out what's wrong with their position and engage with others in critical discourse. Today's conversation will dig into these issues. The title is Cancel Culture in the Theater, What is to be Done? Our conversation today features Carmen Aguirre. Carmen is an award-winning Chilean-Canadian theater artist and author who has written or co-written over 25 plays, including Refugee Hotel, and Anywhere But Here, as well as the #1 international bestseller, Something Fierce, Memoirs of a Revolutionary Daughter, which was the winner of the CBC Canada Reads Prize in 2012. She is currently writing adaptations of Euripides' Medea, commissioned by Vancouver's Rumble Theatre, Molière's The Learned Ladies for Toronto's Factory Theatre, and Linebaugh and Redeker's The Many-Headed Hydra for Ontario Stratford Festival. Carmen has as well over 80 film, TV, and stage acting credits, and is a 2020 Seminovich Prize finalist, I think the most prestigious theater award in Canada. Welcome, Carmen. We are pleased that Carmen will be joined in conversation today by Marilo Nuñez, an award-winning Chilean-Canadian playwright, director, actor, and academic. Marilo is the 2021-22 playwright in residence at Toronto's Aluna Theatre and was McMaster University's first playwright in residence in 2018. She is founding artistic director of Alameda Theatre Company, a company dedicated to developing the new work of Latinx Canadian playwrights. In addition, Marilo is currently completing her PhD in theater and performance studies at York University. Welcome, Marilo.
Thank you.
In terms of today's program, after about 45 to 55 minutes of conversation with Carmen, Marilo will turn to the audience to bring you into the discussion. As you listen to the conversation, if you have a question at any point that you would like addressed by Carmen and Marilo, please click on the Q&A tab that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, not the chat. The chat is disabled in this version of Zoom, but the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and just write in your question as you think of it. Don't wait till they turn to the audience. You don't have to do that. So please click that button, write down your question, and then we'll get to it when we come to that part of the program. Now it's time to hear from Carmen and Marilo. Over to you.
Lucia. I'll start by explaining. So Carmen and I have been friends for, I was thinking about it the other day. We've been friends for over 20 years, Lucia.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
right?
Late 90s, late 90s.
Late 90s. So, and let's explain a little bit about where we come from, how we met. So whenever I talk to Carmen, I call her Lucia, as a form of kind of endearment, like a connection to our country where we were born. We were both born in Chile. We're both the daughters of Chilean exiles, and our work tends to kind of reflect that experience in our work. A lot of our plays and the activism that we do is based in this foundation that we had when we were young. So we met when I produced Chile con Carne, which was your one-woman show that you did in Vancouver, and then that I subsequently did here in Toronto. And I did it right when I graduated from theater school, you know, because of the same issues that you were having in Vancouver, lack of roles for Latina women, lack of, you know, rich, deep characters that we could work with. And so I was very excited to work on your play at that time. And that's when we became friends. And we've been friends ever since, and we've been laughing and talking about theater for a long, long time.
We have, and we've also been comrades. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm joining everybody from unceded Squamish territory, which is downtown Vancouver. And that, you know, Marilo and I come from Latin America, which in the Guna language is referred to Abiayala. And I don't know about you, Lucia, that's our term of endearment. The Chileans will get it. If there's any Chileans in town, that we are not settlers, right?
Yeah.
We did not come here to exploit people or take anything from people or take over people's land. We are refugees here. And I think it's really important to recognize that there is a real difference between being a settler, an immigrant, an exile. You know, our relationship to the land is that we never wanted to leave our land.
Exactly.
Abiayala, you know, Walmapu, which is Chile, right? We never would have left. And we are super grateful to be here. And yeah, just super clear. I just like to make it clear that we're not immigrants or settlers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's an important distinction to make, because you know, I remember growing up, we were always thinking of like, we're going to return, we're going to go back to Chile. You know, all our parents came here as political refugees, and that really marked me, and I know it has marked you as well. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this big topic that is the hot topic now in the world, and it's become a hot topic in theater as well. And so let's talk about the video that you created, that you made for the Push rally. Kind of blew up, and everybody was talking about it. Everybody was watching it. You had intense reactions, both good and, you know, critical reactions to the video. So tell me, what made you make the video? Like, why did you want to make that video?
Yes, I'll get into that in just a moment. And I just wanted to say quickly that you and I were talking on the phone a half an hour ago, and you know, we were expressing how scared we are to have this conversation, right? Like, you know, how scared we are, and that, you know, I heard you say that you're afraid that if you say one wrong word, you're going to be canceled, and that might sound like an exaggeration, but I hear that all the time now from all kinds of different people. Right. So I think it's a critical conversation to be having, precisely because, I mean, to me, the fact that we're scared to have it tells me that we have to be having it.
Yeah. You know, like, there's a sense that you have to be politically correct, that you have to know the lingo to talk now. And yeah, I was, you know, I was being very real when I said, yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about, you know, what if I say something wrong? Because I have my opinions, you have your opinions, and I think everybody listening here has their own opinions about everything in the world, right? And I believe that we should be allowed to express our opinions freely. free expression. The line, there's a line when you start to harm people, when there's violence committed against people. But I think having different opinions, not agreeing, being offended by an opinion is okay. And I feel like we're living in a time right now where that is not okay now. Like, we're not allowed to be offended. We're not allowed to critique somebody. We're not allowed to. So let's get into talking about
okay, so the video. And I've made some notes only because I'm like old, and
I have my notes too, don't worry.
And I don't want to forget anything, and I had to like highlight and like make big font. Old age, man. Old age.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So the video, I mean, just in case some people have no clue what we're talking about when we talk about the video, I'll get into it.
Well, first, actually, why don't you explain what the push rally was about?
Yes.
And because the push rally itself got canceled. So that is something that
that is very ironic. Yeah. The Push International Performing Arts Festival has been around in Vancouver, I think, for like 16 years, and it's a really great festival. It's one of the few festivals in Vancouver where you could, in the middle of January, like the darkest time in deep, dark, rainy Vancouver, you could go through this incredible stuff from all over the world, as well as local performances. And I'm not going to get into this because that's not what we're here to talk about today. But there was a real controversial bunch of firings that happened last, I think it was June, at the Push Festival. And it looked like the Push Festival was in real jeopardy, right, of making it through those firings. So the Push Festival, and I'm just giving Cole's notes here, I'm skipping a whole bunch of details, hired local artists, theater artists, Marcus Youssef and Michael Bay Yamamoto to curate this thing that was called the Push Rally. And the theme of that rally was, how do we navigate conflict without destroying important relationships and organizations?
Which seems like a great thing to talk about, right?
And it was precisely because there was so much conflict going on around Push. And so they commissioned me to write a piece that would be between 20 and 25 minutes, and they were very kind to let me go 5 minutes over, to tackle what that meant to me. Right. So I saw it as a bit of an intervention. Like, a lot of people received it as an open letter. It wasn't an open letter. It was meant for an international audience. And it was a bit of an intervention with, the title Repair, Reunite, Reassemble. And how do we navigate conflict, without destroying important relationships and organizations. Because, we have to remember that organizations in our theater world, are very fragile, right? Including the Push Festival, right? So for many people, the Push Festival might seem like a huge monster of a festival, extremely mainstream, unshakable, impossible to destroy. It's not, right? All of us have built the theater from the ground up, whether it's the Push Festival or our own little company that we're just starting with, or whatever it may be. Our organizations are very fragile. So we need to learn how to navigate conflict within our organizations without destroying them, right? The other thing that we have to remember is that, the Push Festival is not the Minneapolis police force, right? Nor is it Trump. None of our theater companies are any of those things. So we need to understand who it is that we're dealing with. And basically who we're dealing with is our colleagues. Our colleagues who, definitely sometimes we have differences of opinion. Obviously, it would be weird if we didn't, right? So that's the other thing to remember. I've learned also that, the militaristic language hasn't really gotten us anywhere in the theater world, right? So using language like fight the system and challenge the power is just really terrifying to our colleagues, because all they hear is, oh, I'm going to be taken down. oh, my company's going to be shut down. Oh, I'm going to be destroyed. I'm going to be fired. That's what they hear. So I think we've reached a point where it's much more effective and actually empathetic to use language of care and respect. You know,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting into right now, which is what I was hoping the video would be clear on, is I'm getting into transformative justice. That's the topic I'm getting into as we're speaking, right? And I'm a really big believer in transformative justice. You know, I am not a carceral feminist. I'm actually an abolitionist feminist. I feel that I do have some authority to speak on this because I have been involved in not a transformative justice, but a restorative justice process for about 26 years now, with a man who raped me when I was a kid and who was in jail, right? And whose parole hearing I went to about 2 weeks ago. And I had a face-to-face with him, a 5-hour face-to-face with him 5 or 6 years ago. So I feel that I have experience. I have the experience of going through a pretty intense restorative justice process with a psychopath, right? He is a psychopath who is in jail and who is a child rapist. So I'm coming from that place when I say that I'm not a carceral feminist. So just to finish the idea, and I just want to be super clear, I do believe that he should be in jail. That particular person should actually be in jail, just to be clear, right? But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of what I see on social media, a lot of the posts that I see, for example, when George Floyd was murdered, was, abolish the police, abolish jails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet we say those things on social media, but have no problem being punitive with our own colleagues when they make a mistake. We seem to have no problem publicly humiliating and punishing our colleagues and mobbing them when we feel that they have made a mistake. And the problem is that people will make mistakes, myself included. Everybody on earth will make mistakes. And we have to have some kind of due process when mistakes are made. Justice should not be left up to a mob on social media. Okay, I'll stop now because I know you want to say something.
No. So what I wanted to say was, though, okay, so what I feel that the people who are calling out organizations or people who have done harm to the community, historically or presently, what I hear from these people is that they want to change what is currently happening in theater, right? Like, there are issues of systemic racism, there are issues of gender inequality, there are all of these issues that we as women and as children of activists and activists ourselves, we are fighting against, right? So what is the difference between, me wanting to fight for these things to change, right? I don't want racism in the theater. I want everybody to have an equal opportunity than everybody else. So what is the difference between that and cancel culture? Like, why, let's talk about cancel culture. What does it mean? And what is the difference between somebody who's like, no, we're going to cancel it, you can't exist anymore, we're shutting you down, versus, I want to talk about racism in theater and let's try to diminish it, get rid of it, and let's move forward.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's a great question. I wish I had the answer. God. So first of all, I mean, one of the things that you talk about is cancel culture.
Yeah.
And one of the things that keeps happening, even after that video went out, was that one of the criticisms of the video was, what are you talking about? Cancel culture doesn't exist.
Okay, so what is cancel culture? What is cancel culture?
So for me, first of all, you're gaslighting when you say that, because it does exist, right? I would say, and again, it's like a moving target. Everybody has a different definition of what cancel culture is. And a part of me wishes that I hadn't used the term cancel in the video, because people really latched onto it. You know, a part of me wishes I had just said call out culture or purging. However, this person uses the term cancel, right? I just read this book. It's great. We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice by Adrienne Marie Brown. However, she's talking about canceling within movements. And what I'm talking about in the video is not a movement. I'm talking about a sector, right? The theater is not a movement. The theater is a workplace, okay? And what you were referring to earlier was, you know, so you and I, for example, have been fighting systemic racism in the theater literally for decades.
Yeah.
So that is a movement within the theater. It's not the theater itself, right? Our activism is a movement within the theater. The theater is not a movement. Okay, cancel culture. I probably took notes and I'll probably never find them. Okay, so I would say that canceling is the act of canceling, like literally canceling a work of art, a play reading, or an actual artist because we feel that they have offended or harmed us in some way. Call out doesn't necessarily mean that you're literally canceling a play reading or a work of art or a play, right? It means usually that you are publicly, like in the public square, on social media, you are holding somebody to account. The problem with that is that it usually doesn't work. What usually ends up happening is that that person just gets mobbed and there is nothing the person can do, right? No matter what the person says to explain themselves, it's like they're digging themselves deeper into a hole. Yeah. Even when they ask for forgiveness, it seems to not be enough, right? So I'm all for the call in, right? And I'm all for holding people accountable with some kind of process, right? With some kind of due process where people can explain themselves as well, right?
So what would that look like? Like if you had the, you know, you could wave a magic wand and say, okay, this is what we should do in order for this cancel culture not to exist and not to harm people anymore. What would that process look like?
You see, I wish I was God, because then I would have all the answers. Well, I mean, I think about this 10 times a day. What would it look like? What would it look like? What would it look like, right? So
but I think you're getting to something there where it's like a due process.
Yeah, a due process and a call in. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about where I'm coming from for a second. Okay, I was in the Chilean resistance when I was a full operative in the underground Chilean resistance movement against the Pinochet dictatorship from the time I was 18 until I was 22. It was an extremely dangerous thing that I was doing, many things that I was doing, including flying planes illegally under radar over the mountains. Why am I even explaining this? Because one of the things that we would do in the Chilean resistance is have what we would now call call-in sessions. We couldn't do call outs because we were underground and there was no social media. So it's what we would now call call-in sessions. And these sessions would last forever, like 12 hours, where we would learn from each other, right? And quite often the learning took on the form of, listen, you know, you did this thing or you said this thing. When I talk about each other, I'm talking about cells. We worked in cells, right? You did this thing, or I did this thing, or I saw you do this other thing. That wasn't cool, and this is why, right? And it was not about expressing our feelings. I have no problem with feelings. I have done like, I don't know, a grand total of probably 15 years of therapy. No word of a lie, right? But this was not a therapy session, right? So it wasn't about talking about our feelings and how traumatized we were because at any moment we were going to get caught and tortured to death. It was more about learning from each other in terms of sharing ideas and learning from the mistakes that we had made, you know, literal mistakes that we had made that could have gotten us all killed. And then just mistakes in terms of, why are we doing this again? Why are we in the resistance? What is our vision? What is our vision? Okay, so now I'm getting to the vision. The vision that I talk about in the video is the commons, right? And I've been listening, I've been talking about, I've been listening to that word and what it might mean probably since I was in my mother's belly, because I was raised in a socialist family. I consider that a fucking like great stroke of fucking luck that I was raised in a family of socialists who actually practiced socialism, because they were also in the resistance. And I actually do have memories of living under Allende, the socialist government in Chile. I have very strong memories of it. I was in kindergarten, but I remember it. And I remember the day he was murdered and his speech. So I've been listening to that word common since I was a very small child. And I saw it put into practice in my own home and in the movement that I was in, which was the movement that I was in, the Chilean resistance, the MIR, was a conglomeration of all kinds of different people, right? Students, indigenous movements, anarchists, I mean, all kinds of people that came together. And for me, what I like to believe that the commons is in an ideal society, in a utopia, is absolute justice and equality amongst everybody, right? Which is very far from where we are right now in our society, where I think like there's 8 billionaires who control half of the world's wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not that is not a commons, that is not a utopia, right? I mean, I think we suffer from some kind of historical amnesia in North America for sure, right? Where we believe that capitalism seems to be the only way or has only ever been the way, when in fact, capitalism is only 400 or 500 years old, right?
Yeah.
Much of humanity, most of humanity for hundreds of thousands of years before capitalism was organized into a commons, right?
Yeah.
This was before the construct of race, of course, right? As we know, race is a construct constructed by colonialism and capitalism 400 or 500 years ago. I went off on a massive tangent there, but in terms of where I'm coming from, that's where I'm coming from. That's where I'm coming from when I talk about the commons. So if we get really, really specific, like I was thinking about specific examples of people who I admire, who seem to have found a way to use social media as a tool for actual, really respectful debate. And so I go to those pages and I learn a lot, and people are actually being respectful with each other. One of those people is Sarah Schulman, the woman who wrote Conflict is Not Abuse.
Yeah.
I'm her Facebook friend, and she's really good at like putting a question, like an actual question on her feed and saying, hey, everyone, I have this question. I need your feedback. And the questions are not easy questions, right? And then like 400 people will respond, and there will be a real conversation going on, you know? Another person who's gotten really good at that is the director of the School for the Humanities at Simon Fraser University here in Vancouver, Samir Gandesha. He will pose real questions, right, on his Facebook page, and there will be a real discussion and a real debate, and people will be disagreeing without calling each other out or trying to publicly humiliate each other, right? The other person is the executive director of the BC Civil Liberties Association here in Vancouver, Harsha Walia. She also used to run No One is Illegal. She's really good at posing questions or making a statement and going, hey, what does everybody think about this? And then there's a real, so I go to those pages regularly to learn. Those people have mastered the ability to use social media in that way. And one of the keys is that they don't go on about their feelings, and they don't go on about how offended or hurt they are, right? They just want to exchange ideas. Yeah.
So this is what you see as a commons, is like a place, a thing that we can all come together in with different opinions, different viewpoints, and ask questions, debate. I think debate is a big, discourse is a very important thing. So a lot of people were offended by your video. They were critical of the things that you were saying in the video. So let's talk a little bit about that. So some people, for example, have said that you know, one person said they don't have that platform that you have, so how can they engage in a discourse if they don't have the platform or the privilege that you have?
Yeah. No, I hear that. I remember feeling that way when I was in my 20s, right? I remember watching people who were the age that I am now. How old am I? I'm 53. Going, fuck, they have all the power. You know what? You have way more power than you think, especially now.
Yeah.
The video, what is it? It's a brick wall and a camera. Go to a brick wall. Get your friend to film you.
Yeah.
Say what you have to say. Post it on all your platforms, right? And I'm glad you brought up the word privilege. I think that word, we need to be careful with that word, right? So my intersections don't seem to matter when it comes to this video, right? It doesn't matter that I'm a woman of color. It doesn't matter that I'm a refugee. It doesn't matter that I'm a sole parent of an Afro Latinx boy, right? It doesn't matter that I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in a housing co-op. None of that matters, right? Because you don't agree with what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right.
Basically, right? So the other thing about the word privilege is that I think we need to start to use the word human rights as opposed to the word privilege, right?
What do you mean by that?
If you think I'm privileged because I have housing and because I'm able to make a living working really hard in the arts, and because I'm able to feed my son, and because I'm able to sit here and have this conversation with you, then we have an ideological difference, because I believe that those are all human rights. I don't believe that those are privileges. So I think we really have to start to look at the lens, right? When we say privilege, we're actually, when you're referring to somebody like me, I'm not Trump.
Yeah.
My tax return says that I'm way below the poverty line. The reason I call myself middle class, I'm actually lower middle class, is because I am. Am I an elder working at the cashier at Tim Hortons, like an immigrant out? No, I'm not gonna say I'm working class. That's working class as far as I'm concerned. And as a socialist, I actually believe in the abolition of class. I believe in ultimately a classless society anyway. Right now we've gotten into something else completely.
Okay, so I like the critical, like other things, in your video, you mentioned two artists, which you didn't name in the video, and people critiqued you for that. Yeah. But two artists who had experienced being canceled.
Yes.
So let's talk about, why didn't you mention their names? And let's talk about examples of people who have been canceled in our community and the impact that has had on their lives. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So first of all, I didn't name them because it wasn't an open letter to the Canadian theater community. It was a commissioned artwork for an international audience that was going to be attending the Push rally.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the reason why I didn't name them. I thought that they were both super, super, super good examples because they're so concrete, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, okay?
Sure.
This whole thing about, because we're getting into censorship. When I was a kid, was I a kid? Well, I was about 16, so I was a teenager. I was a huge fan of Andrea Dworkin, who was a radical feminist who wrote a book called, I forgot what it was called. I wish I could remember. Men Possessing Women, something like that. And it was an anti-porn book. And I was very much into the anti-porn movement when I was a kid, when I was 16 in the 1980s. Yeah. And I would wear a pin on my chest saying, I don't remember what it said. This is how old I am. But it was basically about censoring porn, right? That all porn should be censored. Porn should not exist. because it was harmful to women. Clearly, where I was coming from was a place of absolute trauma because I had just been like abducted and raped at gunpoint by the paper bag rapist when I was 13. And I had not done any work on that. I had never gone to therapy. It was just frozen somewhere in my body.
Yeah.
So that's where I was coming from. I wasn't coming from a rational place. So what basically I ended up realizing slowly was that I was actually on the side of the fundamentalist right, of the Christian right wing, when it came to wanting to censor porn, right? Because they were using the obscenity laws, right? And going, this is why porn should be canceled. And me, I was going, no, porn harms women because it objectifies women. That's why it should be canceled. What I wasn't able to understand yet at that moment was, if I'm against porn, why don't I just not watch it? You know?
Yes.
Oh, wow. There you go, right? I can just not watch it. I can just not consume it. Why do I need to control what everybody else is consuming, right? And if I want to have a debate about it, then I can debate about it. But this whole notion that it should not exist in the world was wrong as far as I'm concerned, okay? Now, back to the two examples that you were referring to. I think they're really great examples. So the first example is that Sky Gilbert, renowned playwright, producer, director, co-founder of Buddies in Bad Times Theater in Toronto, who, you know, stood up to credible death threats in the 80s and 90s against the, coming from the Christian right. Wrote a couple of very controversial blog posts on his own blog thing, right? Criticizing the title of a book written by a trans woman of color, Vivek Shreya. So he criticized the title, which was I'm Afraid of Men, and the content. There was a huge uproar about that, which is fine. That's totally fine. Like, great, let there be an uproar, let there be a big debate, let there be a big discussion. I think that's totally fine. What I'm not fine with is the fact that Buddies in Bad Times canceled his play reading because of the uproar.
Yeah.
You know, so I thought that's why that was a really great example, right? So many of us were asking, why did you cancel the play reading? And instead of the play reading, there was a round table. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. Long table. I don't know what the term is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great. Have a long table. I think that's very healthy. But why not have both? Why not have both?
Yeah.
I think it sets a very dangerous precedent, right? It's kind of like when people were were celebrating the fact that Twitter deplatformed Trump. I was not celebrating. Don't get me wrong. I'm anti-Trump. Okay, very, very anti-Trump.
Yeah.
But I was not celebrating. I thought that set an extremely dangerous precedent, because make no mistake, that will be used against the left, right? That kind, you know, do we really want a multi-billion-dollar for-profit private corporation to be censoring, to be deciding who gets to speak? We do not want that. I mean, we already know that one of the most canceled people on earth is Julian Assange.
Yeah.
And Twitter, what did they do? I wrote it down. I'll never find my notes. I'm just too messy. Okay. But Twitter basically barred WikiLeaks from getting donations. That's what Twitter did, right? Wow. They barred Julian Assange's WikiLeaks from getting donations. They wouldn't let PayPal go through.
So you think that what happened with Sky and Buddies is sets a bad precedent for future theater?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it sets a bad precedent. You know, I I understand that many people experienced Sky's blogs as transphobic, right?
Yeah.
I have talked to numerous trans people who do not agree that it was transphobic and would never say so publicly because they're afraid to say so publicly, right? that the act of criticizing the content of somebody's book and the title of their book is not in and of itself transphobia, right? I think it would be really convenient for me to, accuse of racism and misogyny anybody who ever criticizes the content of my stuff, right? I could easily say to all the people that went at me after the video came out, and they did go at me, of misogyny and racism. And don't get me wrong, I think a lot of it was. I think a lot of it actually was coming from a place of misogyny and racism. But the act of just criticizing what I put out in the world, that in and of itself is not racism and misogyny. You know, it's just not, right? The other, you asked me for the other
the other example, which was an artistic director in Vancouver, I think, who had
he had shared a Jordan Peterson video, which I never saw because I was so late to the party. I never saw the video because he ended up taking it down by the time I got wind of the entire thing. So I can't speak to the video. I just know that the video was controversial because it was something about questioning the concept of white supremacy. And that he shared this video and said, hey, I think I agree with this. Like, what do you guys think? And, you know, he got mobbed. And then he took down the video and then he asked for help. And then he was accused of extracting emotional labor. And he was destroyed. You know, he had to take down all of his social media platforms. People went into his, into the Wikipedia, is that what it's called? The Wikipedia page, and they added a paragraph denigrating him at the end of his Wikipedia page. It was ugly. It was very ugly. And the problem there, as far as I'm concerned, is that here's a white guy, you know, you could say that he's, you know, truly a privileged person. I think he's upper middle class, right? Cis, straight, white guy, who we, by doing everything we did to him, are basically sending to the far right. That's what we're risking when we do that, right? We are risking sending somebody like him to the far right. You know, what is that saying?
Yeah, well, like,
the left is always purging. The left is always purging. The right is always recruiting. You know, so instead of keeping him, instead of calling him in, you know, instead of really getting into a debate with him, we purged him. And here's the thing, right? I just had to finish this one thought.
Yeah, sorry. I keep interrupting.
No, it's okay. Here's the thing. I can have like a discussion with this man for 10 years. And he, at the end of the discussion, might decide that he's still right-wing and he still doesn't really get the concept of white supremacy. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay, because the thing that we're doing in the theater is, guess what? We're serving the audiences, right? We're serving the audiences. And if we are going to have a homogenous, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word right. Yeah, probably. Okay. If we are going to have a homogenous lens in the theater, we are not actually serving our audiences. You know, we need to have different perspectives, different lenses. Otherwise, we're not really serving our audience. You know, the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Santiago, Chile, which is world renowned. And, you know, I've done work there. I know that you've been there, Lucia, you know. And it's all about the human rights abuses that occurred during the Pinochet dictatorship. That's what that museum is there for. One of the people on the board is a right-winger, very openly right-winger. And I think that makes perfect sense, you know, because he will say very clearly, hey, I don't agree with torturing people. I don't agree with killing people. I don't agree with all this stuff. I don't agree with human rights abuses, but I am right-wing. I am right-wing. You know, I don't agree with state terrorism, but I am right-wing. You know, so the board of that museum went out of their way to make sure that they actually had a right-wing member on their board, because they didn't want it to be an all left-wing board. Yeah. You know, when I ran the Latino theater group here in Vancouver from 1994 to 2002, 120 people went through that group, and we had anywhere between 8 and 12 core members at any given time. The only requirement to join the group was that you identify as Latinx. That's it. So we got ourselves into a bit of a pickle, which was a good pickle.
Well,
well, the pickle that we got ourselves into is that we had everything from somebody like me, right, who was in a left-wing armed resistance movement against an ultra right-wing fascist dictatorship, and a super right-wing person, right? We had lots of, not lots, I don't remember how many, maybe between 5 and 10 over the course of those years. Right-wing people joined the group, you know, and there were people in the group who were children of disappeared people who had been disappeared by death squads in Guatemala, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And we all had to figure it out. And we had to sit in circles for hours and hours and hours and figure it out. We did not purge a single person. We would all look at each other across that circle and be like, wow, you're my enemy. And yet here we all are trying to do theater.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
well,
I want to go on this idea of purging. You mentioned that in your video, The Great Purge, that we're living in the time of the Great Purge. I think that's how you put it.
yes.
So what do you mean by that? That just like the left purges people and the right attracts people? Like, this is what we're doing by, you know, if you don't agree, then you're out, kind of thing?
Yeah. That is what we're doing. I know a lot of people deny this, but I'm just going to stick to my guns here. That is exactly what we're doing. You know, here's the thing. We are living in a moment of incredible fear in the theater community. I understand now. I am going to use the word privilege, you know, because it's the right word to use. I have the privilege to sit here and have this conversation with you, Lucia, because my life is not the theater. I'm very clear about that. The theater is the place I work.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see it as my real life. You know, I see it as in my own brain, I see it as my pretend life. In my real life, you know, most of my friends have nothing to do with the theater, thank God. And they have nothing to do with the arts. My comrades, almost every single one of them, are not in the theater. You know, so I really care about what my comrades think and what my friends think and the movements that I am involved in. The theater world is not a movement, it's a workplace, right? The movements that I am involved in, that's who I care about, what they think about me, right?
But the thing is, the theater is a place where we, like, for example, your plays very much bring your political views, your you know, your personal views to the forefront. Like, your plays are a reflection of society and of the people that you know and the stories and memories that you've had, correct? And so it becomes very convoluted in the theater world as an employment place because of so much personal storytelling and interaction. Like, actors are, you know, continually needing to, like, having to pretend to love each other, or we're telling stories about memories of when we were, you know what I mean? Like, it's a place of so much personal politics that I think that's where the line is so faint. You know, there's not a real line between this is my place of employment and this is my life.
For me, there is. You see, in the theater, here's the thing. You can never take yourself seriously. You can only take the work seriously. The first is disastrous. The second is imperative. That's my motto, right? Yeah. I am there to serve the audience, period, end of story. You know, and I know who I want my audience to be, right? So I'm telling stories about the Latinx community, for example, but not only am I telling that story in terms of it being an identity play, it's a left-wing play. All of them, all of my plays are left-wing, you know? The theater is not a left-wing place. It's a liberal place, which practices neoliberal identity politics, right? Essentialist, reductive identity politics that sees identity as a currency that I can trade in, right? As far as I'm concerned, that is not left-wing at all. That is just neoliberal identity politics, which views the basic characteristic of human relations as competition as opposed to solidarity, you know? So the theater has a liberal politic and a middle class politic, a middle class lens, you know, and identity politics, as far as I'm concerned, is a middle class politic. So what I do with my plays is not only is it the lens of, oh, a Latina woman of color, because I can be a Latina woman of color and be an ultra-fascist pig, right? Like Janine Áñez, the ex-dictator of Bolivia, who's now in jail in Bolivia, right? It's more about the left-wing lens. That's where I see the real risk being for me in the theater, right? Is that the work that I put out there is from an unabashedly left-wing lens. I forgot why the hell I went on about this.
Well, let's see if there's any questions from the audience.
Okay.
If there's Ange, are there any questions at all?
Sorry, yes, there is. I do want to remind people to please, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A button, and we can get to that later. The first question is from Rashmid. Carmen, you referred to restorative justice as different from transformative justice. Could you explain what you see to be the difference between the two?
Sure. Oh, that's such a great question, because I just learned the difference the other day. Restorative justice. Okay, so transformative justice. Okay, no, let me go backwards. Restorative justice takes us to the place of something's happened, something was going on super well over here, something terrible happened, let's restore it back to this. Transformative justice is, here we are, something terrible happened, let's not go back to this. Let's see where we go, where somewhere better, somewhere different, somewhere where we have actually learned from what has happened and can make things better. So that's what I learned the other day from this book, which I totally like, was, you know, please read it. I mean, yeah, that's what I would do if I was you. So that for me, that's the difference, you know, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in transformative justice in the theater, where there is so much fear. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, so let me go on about that for a second, because I think it has to do with your question. Like you said, Marilo, yes, there was a lot of backlash against the video, but really, I'm not a mathematician, but I would say about 80 or 90% of the response was overwhelmingly positive.
Great.
And much of that was private. And basically what I was getting in my inbox was messages literally from around the world, not just Canada, from around the world, talking about the level of fear people are feeling in the arts and in academia, that they are terrified that if they say one wrong thing or make a mistake, because we're all humans and we all make mistakes, right? That they will be purged.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people of all ages, right? Like there's been a lot of ageism in regards to the video. Oh, you know, it's a generational thing. She doesn't get it. She's old. Sorry. A lot of the messages I was getting in my inbox were from people in their 20s in the Canadian theater scene who thanked me profusely and said, I cannot like your video. I cannot press like on it, much less share it, because I will be destroyed. I will lose everything. I am not exaggerating when I say that those are the kinds of words that are being used. Okay, so I shared this with Lucia whenever that was, right before we got on this call. Interestingly, you know, right before we got on this call a couple of hours ago, I got a message, one of many over the last weeks, you know, from a person who had been canceled, right? And using that kind of language, right? Using the kind of language of, I am suicidal. I have not been able to get out of bed for a year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because this person was mobbed on social media. I've done a lot of studying on this mobbing thing. So I've been mobbed on social media. It's a horrific thing to have happen because your reptilian brain, I don't know where it is. I don't know why I'm pointing to this part of somewhere in your head. There's like the reptilian brain cannot tell the difference between online mobbing and physical mobbing. Like, so your body reacts like you are actually being physically mobbed.
Yeah.
And that made sense to me when I learned that. So going back to your question, transformative justice versus restorative justice, what I think that we desperately need right now in the theater is transformative justice. I don't believe that we should go back to the way things were, whatever that was, you know. I believe that we should keep moving forward, but that we need to address the fear in the community, because there is real fear in the Canadian theater community of, if I say the wrong thing, if I put out the wrong piece of artwork, if I defend the wrong person, if I share this, I'm done for. I am done for. It's a real fear. And again, we have to go back to the audience. We are not here to jerk off with each other, right? We are not here to be separatists and to form cults. We are receiving public funding. We are receiving taxpayers' money to serve the audience. We cannot serve the audience. We cannot make art that serves and disturbs, because art is supposed to disturb, if we are terrified.
Yeah.
We can't do it, right? We can't do it. It can't be done, which is why it has to be addressed.
Yeah, that's I totally agree. Totally agree.
Well, you know what? I should say something else about transformative justice. Okay. So I very, very consciously made the choice in the video to only talk about cancel culture, call out culture, purging in regards to people whose ideas we don't agree with, right? Like Sky Gilbert's blog posts,
Yeah.
right? Or the other person who shared a Jordan Peterson video, who for 10 years in the industry had impeccable behavior, as far as I know, right? I did not ever go into, well, what if you've actually assaulted somebody or harassed somebody or bullied somebody? Okay.
Well, what happened at Soul Pepper, for example?
Yes. I still believe in transformative justice in those cases. I still believe in transformative justice. You know, I have a real issue, you know, with dividing the world into people who are good and into people who are evil. You know, I think we are all both. You know, we are all we all are very complicated beings.
So this would be kind of like the difference between canceling somebody and calling them out. So we can call somebody out who has caused harm, but you're saying you still believe that even though this person may have sexually abused somebody, sexually assaulted somebody in the workplace, you know, said racist remarks or, you know, harmful things, that we can still have a transformative justice process with this person because they are human and they can possibly learn from their mistakes.
Well, we have to, right? Because otherwise, what is the alternative? Putting more people in jail? Don't get me wrong. Some people have to be in jail, like the paper bag rapist. He is a psychopath. He should be in jail. He has shown that he has no remorse and blah, 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 right? But most people, right, are not psychopaths. Most people are not the paper bag rapist, right? And so, yes, of course we have to engage in a transformative justice process, even with people who have bullied, harassed, and assaulted in the workplace, you know? And of course, it's really interesting, right? Because we do have mechanisms in place to deal with that, right? I mean, now we're getting into something else, right? Like.
Well, we know that the mechanisms don't always work, right? Like we have systems in place that favor, you know, white people more than others, right? So we have these systems in place that don't always work in the favor of the people who need it most, right?
Yes, but we still have to have some kind of system.
Yeah.
You know, justice cannot be meted out by a mob. We have to have a system. You know, I think in the video, well, I don't think, I know in the video, I go on about, you know, the purgers, right? The purgers have no mission statement. They have not been elected by anybody. They don't have a constitution. They don't have anything. Who are they accountable to, right? Who are the purgers accountable to? You know, as you know, Lucia, right now in Chile, after 18 months of an amazing uprising, and I'm so sad that I have not been able to be there for it in Chile. What was gained through the uprising, because there was a real vision there and there was a real list of demands, is to do away with the Chilean constitution and to rewrite the constitution, right? Yeah. So the constitution, as you know, in Chile, is the same constitution that has been in place since 1980, that was put in place by Pinochet. Mm-hmm. The ultra right-wing fascist dictator. That is the constitution that is in Chile. That's not a good system. That's not a good constitution for many, many, many reasons. I'm not going to go into everything the constitution says. It says a lot of fucked up shit. So what's happened is that now there are constituent assemblies. So what that means is that in the neighborhoods, people are literally getting together in town halls to talk about what they want the new constitution to say. Yeah. One of the people that is running, I mean, there's so many incredible, fascinating people who are running to be deputies in the new, in this process of the Constituent Assembly, which, by the way, Bolivia went through the same thing in 2000, between 2005 and 2009. They rewrote their constitution, as did Venezuela during Chavismo. So one of the people, for example, who is leading one of the discussions of the Constituent Assemblies in Santiago as we speak is Pablo Allende, the grandson of Salvador Allende, right? And one of the things that he's putting forward in the new constitution is let's nationalize all our mines, which, as we know, are in the hands of Canadian multinationals, right? So that's going to be interesting. Yes. I went off on a tangent there. But I forgot what the question was. Oh, the restorative.
Let's just go on to the next question. Next question. And?
Okay. Yep. The next question is from Ryan. Ryan asked, how do you parse the gray areas? For instance, Marilo said that she draws a line at violence, but people do say speech is violence, or can be, and use that as a reason to cancel. If there is a gray area between speech and action, how do you navigate the space and respond to those claims?
I hope I understand the question. Okay, so maybe I understand it, maybe I don't. Okay. We have laws in Canada. I think every country has laws against hate speech. So for me, at this moment, that's what I go on, right? We might not like the laws. We might need to rewrite those laws. Well, then let's do it. Like if we have a problem with the way those hate speech laws are written, let's do it. Let's get together. Let's have a constituent assembly. Let's form a movement and let's rewrite those laws. Mm-hmm. So right now, for example, okay, so I have racism directed at me all the time. And it started from the time I was 6 years old and I arrived in North America. You know, the first time, it doesn't matter. But the last time was probably a week ago. I was walking down the street here on Robson, and every Sunday there is an anti-vaxxer march down my street. I live downtown. And unfortunately, some of the people that come to these anti-vaxxer marches are Proud Boys, and they're very proud to be there. And I had gone for a walk and I came back and I'm walking along. One of these, to put it bluntly, one of these Proud Boys whispered under his breath to me as he passed, "Mexican bitch." Is that hate speech under the Canadian hate speech law? I don't think so, because he didn't threaten my life, right? Did it hurt? In a way. I don't really give him a lot of power. Was it uncomfortable and really just gross and unpleasant? Totally, absolutely, right? Did I worry about my son, who was visibly Afro Latinx, walking down Robson? Of course I did. I don't even know if I'm answering your question. So that's the gauge that I use. Hate speech laws in Canada. Has what we're putting out there, what is being said, what has been directed at me, is it hate speech? Yes or no? Most of the time, no. I might hate it. It might be horrible.
But some of the people who were critical of Sky's blog said that what he was writing and how he was writing it was hate speech towards a trans woman.
No, I disagree with that completely. We might hate it. We might be hurt by it. We might find it offensive. Okay, I'm going to give you another example.
Yeah.
I'm a part of the BDS movement, boycott, divest, sanction. I'm very pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. Hate speech is being anti-Semitic. Being anti-Israel is not hate speech, right? So anti-Semitism is harmful speech, no doubt about it, right? Being anti-Israel or anti-Zionist is offensive to many, many, many people. Trust me.
And they construe that as
but that can be offensive for sure.
Yeah.
They can be extremely, extremely, extremely offended by the fact that I am anti-Israel, but it's not hate speech. Hate speech is anti-Semitism. We have to be very clear here, right? We have to be why do we have to be clear? Because we work in the arts. That's why we have to be clear about it. You know, if I didn't work in the arts, I could probably give a shit about any of this because my bottom line is not free speech. My bottom line is justice and equality. My bottom line is let's get rid of the fact that, 150 million children are homeless right now in the world. Let's make sure that everybody has their basic human rights met. That is to say, shelter, education, medicine. That's my bottom line. Free speech is way down on the list for me. The only reason it's important to me is in the workplace because of where I work, right? And we have to be very clear that we might despise what somebody is putting out there, but that's where I draw the line. If it's not hate speech, then I can argue with them. I can not go to their work, to go see their work, right? But they're allowed to do that.
Okay, let's go to the next question. Ange?
The next question is from Emma, and Emma asks, how do you think this era of cancel culture is affecting young people and youth?
That's a great question. Like I was saying earlier, I think it's harming youth in the sense that I have gotten so many messages from youth and youth who have come up to me when they've seen me and said, thank you for putting that video out there. And basically the thread that runs through all of the messages that I've gotten is fear, that people are terrified of making a wrong move, of using the wrong term, of liking the wrong thing, of even their own artwork, being canceled because they might have a blind spot. I think it is very, very, I cannot overstate it. I think it's very harmful for youth. And here's the thing. We need to be very careful because the more we go towards this cancel culture thing, the more we're shooting ourselves in the foot. If you believe that in 10 years, your work is not going to be seen as offensive in some way, shape, or form, you're living on Mars. Because in 10, 20, 30, 100 years, people are going to look back at your work and be like, that's an offensive word. Like right now, we use the word Latinx.
Yeah.
For all we know, in 20 years, that word will be considered extremely racist, right?
Yeah.
So we might as well just cancel ourselves right this second. And in fact, cancel everything that's coming in the future, because at some point it will be deemed offensive or even harmful. And that's the problem, right? We need to contextualize everything. We need to contextualize where we are historically, where we are socially and politically, when we are looking at anybody's work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I can say about that question.
Here, yeah. And next question.
The next question is from Maria. Maria asked, Carmen, you expressed concern about the destructiveness of people addressing their opposition to others' views by citing their feelings, how hurt they are, how they have been harmed, rather than engaging in critical discourse. Why is that a problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a problem when that is all that you are using as an argument. That's where I think it's a problem, right? And what I have seen is the weaponization of pain and trauma and feelings, right? When we use them as weapons in order to shut a conversation down or a point of view down that we find offensive or that we disagree with. I'll go back to the porn thing. I remember when I was 16, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, literally in a rage. Like I was just like so anti-porn because it hurt me so badly. I wasn't thinking straight, right? I was just coming from a completely irrational place. I wasn't thinking straight in the sense of going, oh shit, why does it have to, like, just because it hurts me so much, that means it should not exist at all in the world? That's crazy. And I can say crazy because I actually do have mental illness. Okay. I have complex PTSD. So,
but you know, like talking about this,
okay,
the porn thing, because I have also been very anti-porn and I think I still am. So if we talk about, okay, I disagree very vehemently that porn shouldn't exist because statistically it harms women. They say that pedophiles watch porn before they go and abuse children. All of these things, add up to this kind of thing where you're like, it's not good. Like some people enjoy it. Some women enjoy being in it, but on like the scale is like heavier on the harmful rather than good, right? So you're saying at one point you switched that point of view onto what? Onto saying they have the right, I should not watch it if I don't like it.
Because of where I work. I work in the arts. So where's the line, right?
Yeah.
You and I might find porn offensive. You and I might find it harmful. You and I might be completely against it. If we are to go out there and rally for it all to be shut down, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Because somebody's going to turn around tomorrow and say to me or to you, hey, you're doing left-wing work. That is offensive to me. That makes me sick. I'm going to shut you down. We have no leg to stand on, right? So for me, I just keep going back to, okay, so what is the basis? The Canadian hate speech laws. That's the basis, right? If we hate the Canadian hate speech laws, stop complaining, go start a movement to change them. Come up with better propositions,
But some people would say, that takes years and years and years. And like, how is my voice going to make a difference?
Oh, sweetie, I have so much to say about that.
Go.
You never struggle for change for you. You never do it for you. It's not for the individual. I mean, a lot of people. That's how they do. You never do it for you. You do it for the future generations. Like I was supposed to be dead at 20. When I joined the resistance, I was doing border work. Everybody knew, and besides, I was told it to my face. The maximum that anybody has ever lived doing border work in the Chilean resistance is 2 years. So I was like, great. So I'm 18. I'll be dead by 20. But, hopefully my grain of sand will have done something for the future of this country. And I wasn't fighting for a country. I was fighting for a cause. Somebody had told me to go join the FMLN in El Salvador. That's what I would have done. So you never do it for yourself. You do it for the future generations. And I forgot what the question was. Oh, the feelings. The feelings are very important. We just can't weaponize them in order to shut down a conversation. We're allowed to have them. We should have them. And at a certain point, we need to use actual rational arguments.
Yeah, no, that's great. Next question, Ange. Thank you.
The next one is from Joshua. And Joshua asks, do you believe the commons is possible using the tools of corporate social media, or is it designed to be confrontational?
That's so great. No, I don't think it's possible. Okay, maybe that's super cynical. I think that, like social media has to be taken away from private hands. I think that it should be seen as public utilities, the way we see, like electricity and hot water, well, water in general, and that it should be taken over by the state and regulated by the state. That's what I think should be done with these social media platforms. Having said that, we are not just consumers of social media, we are also producers of it. So we can decide how we use it, right? And so I think that if we are very, very clear on how we're using it and why we're using it, it can be an incredible tool, which is why I used the examples of Sarah Schulman, Samir Gandesha, Harsha Walia, many others, but those three, for example, of people who use their social media platforms to actually engage in a kind of public discourse commons type of thing, where I learn a lot. Like I go to their pages regularly to see what questions they have posted, and I read through the comments, and I'm just reading, I'm learning. So ultimately, you know, is that a word? Deprivatize? I don't know if it's a word.
I think
Take it out of private hands, put them in the state hands and regulate them. And they should be seen as utilities that we all use, and they should be regulated by the state. And in being regulated by the state, then you would have experts on this. I'm no expert on how to deal with the fact that, of course, there's algorithms, there's echo chambers, right? There's something being done there that can probably also be regulated.
Thank you. And that was a great question. And next question.
Yeah, the next one is from an attendee. Currently, there's a trend of powerful individuals and institutions going on soapboxes to denounce anti-Black race, anti-Black, anti-Asian, anti-Indigenous racism and sexism, etc. But it's very hard to take when these very same individuals and institutions won't acknowledge their part in creating toxic work learning environment. How does one reconcile with that?
Well, it's very hard. It's very hard to reconcile with that, you know, like, here's the thing, right? I used the word comrades earlier. I think that there's a separation in my brain between ally and comrade, right? So my comrades are the people that I fought with in the Chilean resistance. They are people from all over Latin America in the world that I am constantly in contact with, who have fought in the same spirit and in the same kind of movements, and who have literally put themselves on the line, right? And who we agree pretty much 90%. An ally is somebody like what you were just describing. It's a single issue thing, right? So for example, you know, I'm trying to not call anybody out. So if a powerful theater institution is basically virtue signaling, you know, by doing exactly what you just described, I take a step back and I go, are they a comrade? Of course they're not a comrade, but they are an ally, and they're trying. They're trying. That's all they can do right now. They're trying to learn. That's good. That's very good. And then I might have a private conversation with them. And how did I learn any of this? I learned it from the Sandinistas in the 1980s, not the current Sandinistas, the Sandinistas in the 1980s. So the Sandinistas won the revolution in 1979 in Nicaragua. And they did a whole transformative justice thing after they won the revolution with the death squads in Nicaragua. It was incredible. And one of the things that I learned from them was they just kept, one of their slogans after they won was, everybody's just doing the best they can. They're just doing the best they can. You know, so for some people, if they're filthy rich, and they might even be right wing, and they have some kind of charity foundation, and we might be really critical of it, well, at least they have that charity foundation, right? Coming from where they're coming from, they're doing the best they can. So with these institutions, or even individuals who are basically doing this performance of, you know, I am fighting anti-Black racism, I am fighting anti-Indigenous racism or anti-Asian racism. Well, let's believe them. Let's believe them, and let's hold them to account, not by canceling or calling out, but by calling in.
Yeah, yeah. Like I was watching the other video that was put out by this platform by Ryerson between Phil Aiken and Luke Rees. And somebody asked, one of the questions was, you know, I'm in a theater school right now. I'm a Black student. I'm in my final year. And I'm finding it really hard to be in this institution because nothing is changing. And, you know, and I look at that young man and I think, yeah, 25 years ago, I was experiencing the same things and nothing has really changed in a theater school setting, for example, right? So I understand the person who just asked the question, like saying, you know, they're putting on these, like they're saying, yes, we're changing. Yes, we're, you know, we're hiring more Black professors, or we're hiring more, or we're not going to do Shakespeare anymore because we're changing things. But on the inside, it's still not changing fast enough. Like 25 years of you know, artists of color going through training institutions and having nothing change is really frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And that's not the case here in Vancouver, right? So the conservatory that I went to, Studio 58, huge changes there for sure.
Okay, great.
We're
great.
really, really, really listening. And there are massive changes going on for sure. There is no doubt about that. So the other thing we have to be really careful about is, you know, and again, I learned this again in the Chilean resistance. So we lost so badly. Holy shit. We lost so badly. It was not cool, right? Yeah, the dictatorship ended, but it didn't really, you know, the Constitution is still there. And the whole point of the dictatorship was to install a neoliberal economy. And Chile is still, I think, the most capitalist country in the world. So we lost very badly. However, look at what's happening now. You know, those seeds were planted whenever that was. I'm old, right? And now it's happening. You know, and one of the reasons it's happening is because of the seeds that we planted way back then, you know, and all the comrades of mine who fucking died, literally died, were murdered, right? Those count for something. They do count for something, right? So, you know, the other question is, how does change happen?
Slowly.
Well, and also we do it as we go along, right? We do it as we go along.
Yeah.
I have learned that using militaristic language in the theater, like, you know, tear down the system, all that doesn't work. It just terrifies the institutions and our colleagues, and everybody gets frozen and nothing happens, right? It's better to use language of care and respect, and we're all in this together and nobody's trying to get rid of anybody. We are just always striving for more justice and equality.
So that reminds me of another thing that you've talked about is that you don't like to use the word decolonize.
Well, I just find it that it's not specific enough. Like for me personally, you can't talk about colonization without talking about capitalism, because they're basically one and the same, right? Same with, you can't talk about capitalism without talking about imperialism. And of course, we know that all of these things are connected to the construct of race, which is literally a construct. Like we know it's a construct because the second you cross the border, you are a different race. You know, you and I, Lucia, are not women of color in Chile, right? No, the second we cross into Canada, we're women of color, right? So I prefer to just use anti-colonialism. That's all, right? Same with the word BIPOC. I have a problem with it. First of all, it sounds like a hierarchy to me. And I also, it's very static. It's like, it's just kind of fixed in time and in place. You know, I prefer to use the term racialized. Racialized is active. It means that it can change. It's dynamic. And also it includes white people. You know, the white race was created by colonialism for a reason. And so white people are also racialized.
Yeah.
I forgot what the question was.
I think we can have time for one more question.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a lot of questions.
There is. Yeah, we won't get to them all. The next question is from an anonymous attendee, and they asked, do you have advice for an established female artist of color who is doing her best to support their mentors and peers who are being canceled and whose perspective continues to be dismissed and silenced because she does not agree with the purge?
Oh, that's such a hard one. You know, there's so much fear. Oh my God, it's awful. It's the privatization of tyranny, right? Because McCarthyism was coming from the state, but this kind of censorship and purging is coming from within us. You know, it's horizontal, it's not vertical. If you are able to do, you know, something public, which I know is very, very hard, I think that's useful. You know, like a colleague of mine who is not in the arts, but it is in academia, he and I have kind of made a pact with each other that we're going to do the kind of thing that I'm doing right now and the kind of thing that the video did, you know, and he is doing it. He's actually doing it. And I think the more of us do it, the better it will be. You know, I think of that Harper's letter that got completely slammed, you know, because there was like 150 people that signed that Harper's letter that was against cancel culture. And some of them were right wing and some of them were left wing. I saw that letter as an act of solidarity.
Yeah.
You know, like, of course, some of those people can't get canceled, like J.K. Rowling, right? Regardless of what you think about her, right? Because I think she's a billionaire, isn't she? I don't remember. But the fact that she signed it, I saw that as an act of solidarity. The fact that Noam Chomsky signed it, that was an act of solidarity for people who can't speak up. Yeah. Because even if they press like on something, like there's that level of terror that even if they press like on something, they might be canceled.
Yeah.
So I think the more of us go public, the better, right? And I understand how hard it is. Like even me, a person of color, a woman of color, you know, a sole parent, blah, 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 of an Afro-Latinx boy, a person who has been fighting systemic racism in the theater for 31 years at great, great, great personal cost. Even I get destroyed when I put out a video. So that should actually tell you something right there. Right? It's nothing to do with, oh, it's just a white guy talking, whatever. No, it doesn't matter who it is. Right? Even somebody like me, if I'm not saying if you disagree with what I'm saying, you will just tear me down. You will do anything and everything in your power to just tear me down. And a lot of the people who feel like they are powerless, I think that you're living in some kind of bubble because you are wielding your power. You know, when you go on social media to take people down, to call people out, to cancel people, to mob people, to humiliate them, you are wielding your power. You know, and when you say that that has no effect on people, I just think that you probably haven't had that directed at you, because if you had that directed at you, you would know the effect that it has. It has a terrible, terrible, devastating effect. Yeah.
Well, Lucia, this has been, as always, you know, a very invigorating discussion. We always have these kinds of discussions.
Yes, we do.
We laugh a lot. So thank you, Lucia, for taking this time to talk with me and to share with the people who have been here. I think we have like over 70 people here today.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
So thank you, everybody, for being here and for listening to us talk about this very important issue. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim now, who has a few things to say.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the two of you for a really engaging, important conversation that will leave a lot of us many things to think about. I also want to thank the audience for joining us today and participating. At one point, I think we had close to 100 people listening in. So we're very grateful to all of you for participating in this event. Interestingly, Carmen, you talked about someone whose work you admired, Sarah Schulman. Our next event next week on Thursday, April 13th, is featuring Sarah Schulman. And the title of the event is the title of her book, Conflict is Not Abuse, Overstating Harm, Community Responsibility, and the Duty of Repair. For those of you who don't know Sarah's work, she's an award-winning novelist, playwright, nonfiction writer, screenwriter, and LGBTQ activist. Quite remarkable. So if you would be interested in continuing some of the same issues that are talked about today, I'd encourage you to log on next Thursday, April 13th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And all the information about that event and all our future events are on the Center for Free Expression website, which is cfe.ryerson.ca. As well, a recording of this event, a video recording of this event, will be posted on our website tomorrow. And all of our previous events are there too. So if you want to see any of the ones you may have missed that deal with topics of interest to you, and some of the ones that were mentioned during this one, you can have access to all of them. Again, it's at cfe.ryerson.ca. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Goodbye.